Let's begin our news bulletin in Afghanistan, where 43 people have been wounded in an attack close to the National Directorate of Security in northern Samangan province. Muhammad Siddiq Azizi, a spokesperson for the provincial governor, said gunmen opened fire after carrying out a blast. The public health department said the wounded, including 3 children and a woman, have been rushed to hospital. The Taliban have claimed responsibility for the attack and said fighting was still ongoing. Spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid held the Samangan office responsible for recent attacks on the group. He called today's incident an act of revenge. Mujahid claimed 70 NDS members have so far been killed or wounded in the attack. Meanwhile, people in Jammu and Kashmir living on both sides of the line of control are observing the 89th Kashmir Martyrs' Day today. The day is being observed with a renewed pledge to continue the struggle for Kashmiris' right to self-determination. More on that now in this report.
As the Kashmiri freedom struggle in the face of Indian tyranny continues under New Delhi's illegal annexation, the Kashmir Martyrs' Day reminds the world of almost a century of sacrifices by the resilient people of the occupied valley. On the 13th of July 1931, 22 brave Muslims protested against the oppression of Dogra regime and were martyred outside Srinagar in cold blood. After abrogation of the Article 370 in December 2019, the Indian government dropped Kashmir Martyrs' Day from its list of public holidays for 2020. Instead, New Delhi added October 26th to the list to be observed as the Accession Day, which was in fact the day of occupation of Jammu and Kashmir. The All Parties Hurriyat Conference has called for a complete strike in the valley to observe the day. Veteran Kashmiri politician Syed Ali Gilani says the people of occupied Kashmir have not and will not submit to Indian oppression.
Well, in his message on Kashmir Martyrs' Day, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan said the day is not far when Kashmir will be liberated from the clutches of illegal Indian occupation. Prime Minister Khan said he salutes Kashmiris for their continued struggle against the barbaric occupation of Jammu and Kashmir. Khan said the martyrs of July 13, 1931 were the forefathers of today's Kashmiri resistance movement. He said Kashmiris continue to valiantly fight and defy a Hindutva supremacist regime. The Prime Minister said Pakistan has always remained in its support for the Kashmiri right to self-determination and will continue to do so. Conferences, seminars and protest rallies are scheduled in front of the Indian High Commission in Islamabad and across Pakistan. 6 civilians have been wounded in unprovoked Indian firing along the line of control. The military's media wing said an 11-year-old girl and 2 women were among those wounded in Hoirata and Rakhchikri sectors. The military said Pakistani troops responded effectively and targeted the Indian posts that initiated fire. The Foreign Office said India has committed more than 1,600 ceasefire violations in the year 2020. Spokesperson Aisha Faruqi said 13 civilians have been martyred so far. She called Indian actions along the line of control a threat to regional peace and stability. Well, Yemen's Houthi rebels claim they've hit multiple Saudi facilities in a large-scale operation. Houthi spokesperson Yahya Sari says military and oil installations in Jazan, Najran and Asir regions were targeted with ballistic missiles and drones. Sari said dozens of military officials were killed and wounded in the raid on Tawawin camp in Ma'rib. He said the operation was a response to the Saudi-led coalition's aggression in Hajjah province, which killed 10 people. Riyadh says it has shot down 2 Houthi ballistic missiles and 6 drones launched from Yemen towards Saudi Arabia. Coalition spokesperson Colonel Turki al-Maliki said the attack targeted citizens and civilian infrastructure. Iraq's military says 5 ISIS fighters and 2 security personnel were killed in a raid on a militant hideout near Baghdad. In a statement, the military said the fighters were killed in a land and air-backed operation by Iraqi forces and the U.S.-led coalition. The military said an Iraqi force affiliated with the intelligence service struck ISIS targets in a village southwest of Baghdad. It said the troops, backed by an international coalition drone, killed 4 suicide bombers, while the 5th blew himself up. ISIS gained full control in Mosul, Saladin, and Anbar provinces and seized territories in Diyala and Kirkuk provinces in 2014. However, Iraqi security forces have managed to regain control in subsequent years. In Hong Kong, hundreds of thousands of people have voted in pro-democracy primaries, despite warnings that doing so may breach the new security law. The 2-day vote will determine opposition candidates for September's elections to the Legislative Council. Organizers set a target of 170,000 voters across the weekend, but officials said that more than 600,000 people took part. Long queues formed with people voting via their mobile phones after having their identities verified. In Poland, incumbent President Andrzej Duda has won re-election, narrowly beating rival Rafał Trzaskowski. The National Electoral Commission says Duda won over 51% of the vote, while Trzaskowski received nearly 49%. The election body said record turnout was witnessed on polling day, and 68% of registered voters cast their votes. Duda has strongly backed most government changes to the judiciary, which the EU says have undermined the rule of law. The election was widely seen as a battle for the country's future, as well as its strained relations with the EU. The president is an ally of the ruling Law and Justice Party, who earlier said the final vote count will show the seriousness of the challenge the opposition poses.
Like I said during the campaign, there is and there must be a place for everyone under the white and red flag, our common flag, and the national anthem. And all of us should work to make sure that everyone feels that there is a place for them.
21 people have been hospitalized after an explosion and fire on board a U.S. Navy ship at the San Diego Naval Base. U.S. Navy spokesperson Mike Rainey says the 17 sailors and 4 civilians did not have life-threatening injuries. Another spokesperson, Rear Admiral Charles Brown, said injured sailors mostly sustained smoke inhalation and minor burns. He said about 160 sailors were on board and all have been accounted for, while the ship normally carries a crew of about 1,000. The commander of the Navy's Expeditionary Strike Group 3, Rear Admiral Philip Sobek, said the cause of the explosion was unclear.
This time, brave sailors and commands or ships all around San Diego are fighting to save USS Bonhammer Shard. Alongside our friends at Federal Fire in San Diego, we learned that approximately 08:30 this morning, a fire was reported in the lower vehicle storage area on board Bonhammer Shard.
Mexico has overtaken Italy to become the world's 4th worst hit country from COVID-19. The country reported 276 more fatalities as the tally crossed 35,000. Brazil's daily death toll has fallen to 635 from the previous day's 1,071, with the toll over 72,000. Globally, the virus has killed over 569,000 people and has infected 12.9 million. More on that now in this report.
With the Americas struggling to contain the coronavirus pandemic, experts warn the real number of cases can be far higher due to testing lags. But U.S. President Donald Trump is pressing schools to reopen, threatening to cut funds to those who defy the policy. Meanwhile, Japan and the U.S. are sharing information about coronavirus cases at U.S. military bases in Okinawa Prefecture. Down south, Argentina's cases topped 100,000 as the outbreak spirals out of control despite restrictive measures. The government says it will continue extending the lockdowns until the situation improves.
We believe this peak will plateau and not decrease for a while. That is the most dangerous thing, being at a peak for a long time. That is what is going to make beds fill up much faster and the intensive care beds get quickly occupied.
South Africa has introduced new restrictions including nighttime curfew, compulsory face covering, and a ban on alcohol sales. After Victoria, Australia is now fearing a second wave in the most populous state, New South Wales. 14 new cases emerged with a growing cluster at a pub used by freight drivers in the state. In Spain, Catalonia's regional government has confined residents to their home after registering 816 new COVID-19 cases in the last 24 hours.
Que les hem de prendre ara, precisament.
They are complicated measures, but we believe that we must apply them now precisely to not to reach a worse situation that leads us to depend on these measures and others as a total and harder confinement. Therefore, we are attacking this complex situation now in order to overcome it.
Ara,
In Asia, the Philippines has reported 162 new coronavirus deaths, the country's largest single-day increase. South Korea's new virus cases have increased as imported cases and cluster infections in major cities continues to rise. The country added 62 cases, including 19 local infections, with the total infections crossing 13,000, while mainland China has reported only 8 new coronavirus cases.
Here in Pakistan, another 69 people have died of COVID-19 in the past 24 hours, with the death toll rising to 5,266. The Ministry of Health says 2,769 new cases have been detected, with the tally crossing 251,000. The ministry said nearly 162,000 people have recovered from the virus so far. Officials said some 1,800 patients are critically ill. There are over 84,000 active cases across the country. The province of Sindh is worst hit by the virus with over 105,000 infections, while Punjab has reported more than 87,000 cases. In New Zealand, the gunman behind the shootings at 2 Christchurch mosques has sacked his lawyers and opted to represent himself. This has raised fears that Tarrant will use a sentencing hearing next month to promote his white supremacist views. At a pre-sentencing hearing, High Court Judge Cameron Mander allowed Tarrant's lawyers to withdraw from proceedings at the request of their client. But the judge has ordered standby counsel to be available next month in case Tarrant changes his mind. The Australian national Brenton Tarrant will be sentenced on August 24th on 51 murder convictions, 40 of attempted murder and 1 of terrorism. He has pleaded guilty to the charges. I'll be back after this break with plenty more news. Stay tuned. Let's begin this segment of the Bulletin in Nigeria, where 22 people have been killed in armed attacks on villages in Kaduna State. Police said many others have been kidnapped and wounded in the Zangon-Kataf area. Officials said the armed militants attacked the Kigudu community close to Chibok in Athiap chiefdom. They said 10 women were among those killed. Authorities said security forces were sent to the area and a 24-hour curfew has been imposed. The country's northwest sees occasional clashes between the herder Fulani people and neighboring sedentary tribes. The foreign ministers of Libya and Italy have discussed ways to deal with irregular migration in a telephone conversation. The spokesman of Libya's foreign ministry, Mohammed Al-Qablawi, said the two leaders also discussed measures taken by Tripoli on the issue. Libya lies on a major migration route to Europe as it struggles to end the aggravating civil war between the GNA and LNA. Earlier, the country's president, Fayez al-Sarraj, attended the opening ceremony of an immigration coordination center in Malta. Well, the death toll in Japan after a week of torrential downpours, which caused severe floods and landslides, has risen to 70. State media said there are 13 people still missing. The Fire and Disaster Management Agency said at least 12,600 homes and buildings in 20 prefectures have been destroyed, damaged, or flooded. Meteorological officials said further heavy rains are expected over the next 2 days, and some regions may receive up to 12 inches of rain. State media said Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will visit flood-affected areas in Kumamoto Prefecture today. The southern island of Kyushu has been battered by heavy rains for more than a week. American actress and wife of Hollywood heartthrob John Travolta, Kelly Preston, has died at the age of 57. She battled breast cancer for nearly 2 years. Preston is famous for her roles in blockbusters such as Jerry Maguire and Twins. Preston met Travolta in 1988 when they appeared together in a film called The Experts and married on September 5th, 1991 in Paris.
Kelly would actually bring her girlfriends over to have me do Shapiro.
I loved it so much.
She was so entertained by my interpretation that she one day woke me up and said, "Come on, do Robert for them." So, oh gosh, honey, I'm.
Pakistan has decided to resume Afghan exports through the Wagah border crossing from July 15th after implementing COVID-19 protocols. The Foreign Ministry said the decision was taken at the special request of Kabul to facilitate transit trade with India. With this step, Pakistan has now restored bilateral trade and Afghan transit trade at all border crossing terminals to pre-COVID-19 status. Spokesperson Aisha Faruqi said Islamabad remains fully committed to further strengthening its bilateral relations with Kabul. Well, the UK has urged businesses and individuals to prepare for the end of Brexit transition period on December 31st. This comes as the government kick-started a new information campaign titled UK's New Start, Let's Get Going. The information campaign will begin today with advertisements appearing on TV, radio, billboards and online. The UK's Senior Minister for Brexit, Michael Gove, says progress is being made in trade talks with the EU. However, there are still divisions. He said Britain is leaving the single market and customs union with or without a deal by year's end. In June, the UK officially told the EU it would not seek an extension to the transition period beyond December 31st. In Libya, the National Oil Corporation has accused the UAE of instructing Khalifa Haftar's eastern forces to disrupt the country's oil output and exports. It referred to a recent comment by Haftar, who said output will continue to be interrupted if certain conditions were not met. The corporation said it has reimposed force majeure on all oil exports to limit its responsibilities arising from agreements. It alleged the instructions to halt oil production came from the UAE to Haftar's forces. The NOC said the act was disappointing and urged the UN Security Council to call those responsible to account. Libya, with the largest oil reserves in Africa, can produce 1.2 million barrels of crude oil per day. Now, European stock markets have advanced despite surging COVID-19 cases in some parts of the world. Regional stocks are witnessing a fresh rally as investors approach quarterly and yearly earnings seasons. Frankfurt's DAX is trading nearly 1% higher. London's FTSE 100 has gained nearly 1% after G4S stocks jumped nearly 9%. The CAC 40 in Paris is also gaining ground to surge nearly 0.5%. In Asia, the Nikkei 225 led the gains, closing over 2% higher. Seoul's Kospi and China's Shanghai Composite gained over 1.5% each. Meanwhile, international benchmark Brent crude has lost over 1% despite recovery in global oil demand. Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. For the latest updates on these and other stories, you can always follow us on our social media at Indus.News. Thanks for watching.